So we finally got a much clearer picture of Chrono Odyssey, one of my most anticipated MMORPGs in the past few years. Ever since the first teasers back in 2020, players including myself were eagerly awaiting for more details, especially on gameplay. Well, ladies and gents, that moment finally happened today. We've got a massive developer interview that goes in depth over many of its features, from combat, exploration, crafting, grouping up, classes, dungeons, and much more. Plus, we got a closed beta that starts in June, so we're gonna have a lot to discuss in this video, and let's get started. You're going to, of course, find the interview on the official Chrono Odyssey YouTube channel, but pretty much what it's been discussed over there is that the developers were aiming to create an MMORPG where progression is just as enjoyable as the endgame content. Rather than focusing solely on competitive aspects like PvP, they want players to explore seamlessly without any loading screens and pretty much engage in their own adventure. The emphasis here being player agency, allowing you to forge your own stories through exploration and adventure, moving away from rigid main quest lines. To that end, what they've detailed is that you're not forced into doing one single type of activity, so you're not forced to do PvP or group play, for example, if you don't want to, or even combat for that matter, although the rewards are definitely worth it and the content looks really cool, as you're going to see in just a little bit. But even the most menial of tasks will prove rewarding. For example, it was mentioned how being able to reach max level is totally possible even if you focus purely on just exploration, gathering, or crafting. Pretty much everything you do in this game will provide XP. It also looks like quest design encourages self-discovery, as the developer mentions that the game will limit the readily available information, with the ultimate goal being of creating a game that evolves with its players. So something that reminds me a lot of Guild Wars 2, or if we're talking about single player games, even recently Elden Ring, where you're pretty much free to make your own adventure and approach content at your own pace and in almost whichever order you want. Now, in terms of its game world and setting, developed in Unreal Engine 5, Chrono Odyssey unfolds in a realm called Cetera. The game looks like it's been designed as a completely open world adventure without any loading screens, or at least that is the plan. Taking advantage of this tech, its art style blends realism with the surreal. So you will see environments portrayed in realistic ways, such as forests or full-blown mountain ranges, but with massive otherworldly entities and structures scattered throughout them. Citing, of course, also inspiration from games like Chrono Trigger, but also movies such as Prometheus when it comes to both game design as well as art style. Now, an overwhelming presence in this land is also provided by the ominous force called the Void. These are horrific entities that no mere mortal can resist, as well as gods, humans, and a variety of other creatures that we'll get to encounter. And I'm not gonna lie, some of this art style over here looks really great. I'm definitely looking forward to trying out some of these combat encounters, obviously. But in terms of exploration and adventure, that's going to play a huge role over here, with players having a lot of freedom when it comes to making their own adventure. And there are some unique exploration mechanics at play over here too that we're going to jump into in just a little bit. But overall, it's looking like our characters are able to jump and grab onto structures, as we've seen from the gameplay shots over here inside what appears to be a major city of some sorts. Plus, there's this levitation power featured a bit later on to reach some of the platforms further away. But specifically, a more central mechanic is the manipulation of time and space using a device called the Chronotactor. So this allows for exploration by tracing the past or peeking into the future. And for example, we can see that the player here is manipulating time to reconstruct these ruins, which according to the developer, this can end up revealing hidden routes or reconstructing past monuments. There's even a records section in the game menu that shows what has been unlocked in this way in the game. So it seems like it's going to be a huge mechanic that's going to involve involve both exploration but will also be part of the main narrative. And the goal here is obviously to integrate this power of time manipulation seamlessly into the quest progression as well, allowing your actions to change the world and unlock new exploration elements. Aside from the main questline, players will also find a variety of content in the game world that comes in the form of trials, labyrinths, and field bosses. In fact, most of the in-game activities will grant XP, as I was mentioning, allowing players to reach maximum level even through gathering and crafting alone. So you can progress through exploration and crafting if you want to without feeling compelled to actually partake into group play or specifically combat, even if it is PvP. Specifically, trading was being mentioned as something you could benefit from this, on top of sharing information with players that do engage in combat. So we can see some of this in action, with players being able to mine rocks for special minerals or gather plants while still being capable of acquiring XP and leveling up. Although from my experience with MMOs, I'm expecting the rates of XP to not be as high as some of the other activities. Like, I'm definitely expecting open world bosses to provide much more, both in terms of that and rewards. But it's great to see that we can actually choose our own playstyle and not feel compelled to go behind various types of content. And on that note, I do want to talk about the combat and the class system, as that is the main highlight over here. Starting of course with some of the extra class information we got here. We do get some extra stuff on the Berserker and the Assassin, two of the classes in the game. So Berserkers are relentless warriors embodying raw fury with unmatched ferocity, and in this case you can pretty much think of them as kind of like a barbarian mixed with a warrior, but with a bit of God of War in there, as you're going to see from the weapons. So the three main weapons being used here include the chain blades, the twin axes, and the battle axe, where the chain blades can actually be used to pull enemies towards you, which is really interesting, again referencing that God of War playstyle. But we also get access to twin axes for delivering devastating blows, and it seems that the battle axe is actually a bit more, I would say, support-ish in style, providing sturdy defenses for allies as well. There's also the mention of a resource called Rage, so again playing that warrior playstyle. And then we have some extra info on assassins, masters of stealth and precision, striking from the shadow to eliminate their targets with ruthless efficiency. And in this case we see three weapon types being featured, including saber and wrist blades, which are pretty much used to deliver precise hits even amidst the dangers of combat, and then the musket, a ranged damage option to catch unaware enemies. And in case of the class resources mentioned, we have Vigor and Bloodlust, used to unleash devastating blows in quick succession, but again that's just the description. It's obviously going to function a bit differently when it comes to gameplay mechanics. But there were at least two other mentions, and of course we have the old gameplay videos. At the very least, there's also supposed to be a ranger as well as some kind of mage class that's also able to perform healing. But since we are on the subject of that, I do want to mention that the developers wanted to make it clear that Chrono Odyssey's goal is to break away from the traditional MMORPG class system of pure tank, pure DPS, or pure healer, which typically forces you into a very specific playstyle. Instead, they wanted to make combat feel meaningful no matter your class choice. So one thing they've done is that they added a parry and dodge system for everybody to ensure that the battle outcomes aren't just decided by pure stats, but factoring in player skill as well. Meaning, even if you play as something that focuses on healer or buffing, you can still be useful in combat. And speaking of that, we have to talk about weapon switching. An even bigger way you're going to break the traditional MMO classes is by having these weapon swaps rather than being purely focusing on chaining skills together. So each of the classes has a variety of weapons, as we've just seen, and you're encouraged to swap between weapons in combat, not just to create powerful synergies, but also to avoid having to wait for skill cooldowns. There were even mentions of a very early on elite boss that will feel much more difficult if you stick to just one weapon. Instead, if you use that weapon swapping, you can use more abilities and even combo them in your own way. Furthermore, swapping weapons is also about swapping your setup in real time. So for example, you can have one setup that grants passive buffs or maybe even healing, and then change back to one that deals damage, which actually sounds really cool. That is why the core philosophy of the combat system is that it's easy to learn but difficult to master. Rather than crafting too many skills, they designed each one to have multiple functions, with situational skill usage being at the core of Chrono Odyssey's combat. So since each weapon features a distinct style, your playstyle can change dramatically depending on which combination you choose, being free to create your own attack patterns, adding a lot of depth and strategic variety when it comes to each class and its toolkit. Another interesting thing they've done, instead of adding large-scale siege battles or pure arena-style PvP, they kinda mixed it all together, at least in part, and there's also the availability of PvPvE systems. There's one shot over here we can see in which some players engage in PvP battles, but there's also a boss in the area that is a constant threat. But you're going to see in just a little bit that PvE is actually huge in this game, both for solo and co-op play. And speaking of co-op, on a final note, we can see that the party sizes can go all the way up to maximum of 5 players at the same time. So focusing more on smaller but better coordinated groups rather than large raids like in games such as World of Warcraft. And on that note, I want to jump to the next section, which relates to core gameplay and specifically both single and party-based content. So in the upcoming closed beta test, we're going to get to see a lot of this, both the single and the co-op play. So on the single player side, we're going to see chrono gates and trials, among others. And also on the multiplayer side, we're going to see dungeons and field bosses. So let's start with the chrono gates. These are one-on-one battles against powerful void apostles. These are single player challenges that the player partakes into head-on and will involve learning attack patterns of these dangerous foes and also strategic reactions. So we can see it's more than just parries and dodges, even navigating to set bosses will prove to be perilous. While difficult, these challenges are also meant to hone your skills and also provide highly valuable rewards, like pretty much everything else in the game. Then we have the trials, the second single player activity. These will use the time travel mechanic even more, and they are challenges that involve puzzles, traps, and randomized mechanics, not just enemies. One aspect mentioned over here was how players will refine their combat skills during these trials as they move on. This may have something to do with this trial keeper NPC we can see over here called Zakel that is briefly shown in one of the shots, maybe having something to do with unlocking some kind of buffs, powers, or items that will help during those trials. Now, on the party-based content side, we're gonna have the dungeons. The main goal here obviously emphasized being teamwork and party coordination. Dungeons are one of those, and they are designed for parties for up to 3 players, such as, for example, the Howling Pit that we see over here. Interesting to note is that we can see the debuffs applied by each player over here on the boss, further emphasizing that teamwork. We can see that there are stacks of bleed, some kind of armor reduction mechanic, and at least one that is applied probably as some kind of slowed down mechanic on the boss's movement. So just some of the examples of party synergies they were talking about. And then we have the field bosses. As the name implies, these are bosses you're going to find out in the open world. These are much more challenging than anything, and of course they involve fighting some of these special bosses called guardians. And it also seems that the party size limit over here is going to be up to 5 players instead of just 3. But these unique bosses will provide unique gear that's supposedly linked to the game's lore and narrative somehow, so possibly unlocking some kind of special powers. We're going to see some of the gear in just a little bit to make it a bit more clear. Now, content is going to extend to more than just this. We also have challenges related to exploration, and a couple of them mentioned were labyrinths and time portals. So labyrinths, you can think of them as jumping puzzle challenges. They involve traps, collapsible environments with special treasures that wait you at the end of them. So they offer a nice break from the typical monster encounter. Instead, they put your exploration capabilities and problem-solving skills to the test. Then there's time portals, again played playing on that time travel mechanic, you get to interact with these special portals or doors that will bring you to the past. For the most part, these are meant for you to gather special resources, but it's looking like from the gameplay that there's also some kind of combat being involved over here. I think that this is some kind of control point that may enable those enemies to attack you, on top of the fact that it revealed more about the game's lore. And then we also have bounty hunting. It seems that there's going to be a bounty board in the game with many of these bosses or bounties that we can go ahead and hunt into the open world. And these activities involve both using your exploration skills to track down these bounties before actually engaging in combat with them. So likely good to have at least a few of them activated at any given time, especially if you're about to do exploration anyway. But these bounties may eventually even lead you to secret areas or other places worth exploring. But yeah, we also have to talk about the character progression. Like I said before, pretty much everything in the game gives you XP, but when it comes to actually improving your character's power, mainly that's going to be done through crafting and exploration, or at least these will be a major part of it. Using skills to gather rare materials, you get to then funnel that into crafting better and better gear. And we've seen that Chrono Trigger actually features a very robust crafting system that involves crafting armors, weapons, and even other consumables. And armors seem to feature different tiers of weight and quality besides just the level requirements. So for example, we've seen the crescent plate armor crafted over here. Besides the weight class, level requirement, and tier, it's also featuring defensive stats like magic, physical, and crit defense resistance. Also passive stats like wisdom and dexterity, but probably others will have something else. And also unique bonuses for PvE and PvP. So some of them include Relentless, which is some kind of damage over time effect power, and also some PvP unique effects such as increasing damage or reduction in some of the damage dealt onto you specifically for PvP. And also processed oil we can see is one of the resources, while high-end resources that's being funneled into crafting cloaks in this case. But like you can see, all of them provide some kind of XP, specifically mastery and swordsman XP being mentioned over here. But also part of this mechanic is the enhancement system. So once you crafted a piece of gear, you also get the option to enhance it, specifically increasing its stats even more. We can even see some of the materials being used over here involving gold, as well as something called fragments of eternity. And the grayed out enhancement bonus makes me believe that there are some special extra effects that we can get after a specific number of enhancements are being done on that piece of gear. Again, all these actions give XP, so you can technically max level your character even through this. But we're going to get a closed beta in June that we can go ahead and also try out. There are two ways in which you can participate in this. If you head over on Steam, you're going to have the option directly to try your luck and participate in that beta right from the screen over there. But there's also a partner program right now that let you pretty much link your channel over there. So you're going to have a chance to be drawn as one of the content creators to jump into the game and also test it out. Fingers crossed that we're going to have a lot of content on the channel about this as well, but obviously more news and gameplay info will be posted in the future. But if you want to stay up to date with everything Chrono Odyssey related, definitely make sure you subscribe to the channel and leave a like on this video, plus activate that notification bell, and I will see you guys in the next video.